Welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. Every week, we bring you a story fresh from our gray matter. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to review a story. Well, guys, we made it through another long journey.
Yeah.
Our first ever fiction by another name that we seriously tried to do fiction by another name with. It was Space Hobbit.
Yeah. Named William Higgins.
William Higgins.
Yeah.
Instead of Bilbo Baggins.
Yes.
Yep.
In a fantasy sci-fi genre, which was fun too.
Yeah. And you know, Seth, what you were talking about? So we're going to do tons of spoilers for our story. So listen, if you're the audience and you're wondering what in the world are they talking about, go and listen to the last 3 episodes. But Seth, I was just reading the part of the Hobbit to my daughter where they find the mountain and they go into, and Bilbo goes into the mountain for the first time and meets Smaug. Doesn't meet Smaug. Yeah, he kind of does. He kind of meets him, but Smaug is like asleep at first, and then he grabs the chalice and leaves, and then Smaug flies around the mountain a couple times and then comes back, and then Bilbo goes back. But I was thinking when you were talking about the dwarf characters, about how they were kind of like androids who had like their specific way of thinking. It's really interesting in the story in the Silmarillion about the creation of the dwarves. So there was this really powerful creature whose name was Aule, and he made the dwarves because he was so excited about the future creation of men. And he made them, and then the god of the world found them and found Aule, and he said, "You created these to worship you." And Aule was like, "No, I was just like so excited to have the things that you talked about. The things that you explained to me were just so far away. That's why I created them so short." That's literally what he said. Like, that's why they're so short, is because they were so far away he couldn't quite get a picture of what they looked like. And it kind of shows that like dwarves are sort of single-minded, stubborn, incredibly stubborn. And it was just, I thought, a really appropriate picture to have them be kind of these like logic-based, potential-based androids who can't really like do anything else except for do exactly what they have been doing, you know? So I thought that was a really appropriate picture. Just having recently read those chapters just today, I was like, wow, that's like really appropriate that they were kind of these, because if you read it, you realize very quickly that Bilbo is the leader, right? Thorin is the king under the mountain, right? The rightful heir to the throne of the king under the mountain. But Bilbo very quickly becomes the leader of the party. And I just thought that was pretty interesting. Just having been, sort of more acquainted with the books, having them be very fresh because I'm reading them to my daughter right now. So
yeah, I cut little snippets and stuff because the kids just listened through them on the audiobook. And I'd get like suckered in and sit there and listen and then have to scuttle away and do other stuff that I had to do. So I was catching bits and pieces. But
and I liked how you worked in, kind of an allusion to the necromancer. Like the wizard had to go off. He had other things he had to deal with. So he left the dwarves and the hobbit on their own. And that was good too. That there was other things that the thing that I love about the Hobbit and the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, is there's that constantly there in the back of the story is there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that is not, it's peripheral to, but not in any way just incidental. It is very intricately associated, in the world at large to the pinpoint story that we're following, and I like the way that you wove that in with the wizard, with what did we call him, Randall?
Yeah. One of the things that I was kind of thinking about was that I wanted, not that we are going to make the Lord of the Rings in space, right? Not that we're going to do that, but I wanted to be sort of ready so that we could, I want to have a system in place for how the ring analog, which is like a pet in our story, could actually be the ring, like
the space squid.
Yeah, the space squid thing. How does that actually be the actual one ring? Oh, sorry, spoilers for those of you who have read The Hobbit but haven't read Lord of the Rings. Same thing with the necromancer, is that I wanted there to be sort of this this reality that we wanted to, we could make Lord of the Rings in space. Although I did feel like we didn't do a super great job, because really Lord of the Rings is just a bunch of different encounters strung together with then they walked for a couple of days. You know, it's like, if you think about it, there's the unexpected journey. I mean, there's the unexpected party, and then there's the trolls, and then there's Rivendell, and then there's the mountain, and then there's the eagles, and then there's Bjorn, and then there's Mirkwood, and then there's the spiders, and then there's the elven place, and then there's Lake Town, and then there's the mountain. You know, with in between, they journeyed on for a bit. And I guess I just started to get weary of the having to say, well, this is how the river worked in space, you know? Like, I want to do Fiction by Another Name again, and I think that the next time we do it, it'll be good. I just want to make sure that we're giving each aspect of the story, which is important, its due. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it's just very easy to say, and then they just moved on from there to, which I am definitely guilty of doing, you know? But anything else you guys thought was interesting?
I don't think I'd want to read it as a book, but I'd definitely love to see it as like a maybe 2 or 3 part sci-fi trilogy.
Yeah, I was thinking it would make kind of a decent, like, kind of space opera. No, what was it, this one? Or was it a different one I was thinking was kind of like a space opera? No, it must have been a different one. Sometimes, guys, I'm talking to my listeners here and to Seth and Reed. Sometimes I get this really great idea when I'm driving somewhere, and I think, oh yeah, I gotta tell them about that really great idea. And then we come here to record, and then my brain is being racked because I remember I had a good idea, but I don't have any idea what that idea was.
Just wait till you're
Don't say you're not alone.
Uh-huh.
I have great ideas, all just strewn all over the road behind me. Yeah, great stories I've told to the windshield as I was driving.
Yeah. Do you guys think that it's important when doing Fiction by Another Name that we remember every single aspect? Right, that there be an analog for every single thing? You know, should we have had an analog for the trolls and for the eagles and for Bjorn? Like, couldn't we have just like skipped over Bjorn?
Yeah, we could have. But I got anti-hero, and like I was trying to picture, Bjorn strikes me as a real anti-hero kind of guy.
No, for sure.
He fits the exact title of it, so I wanted to put it in. But I think it was Seth that even suggested it. You know, I like, there's lots of stories. Like, I think about particularly, so many of you have seen the movie The Princess Bride, and far fewer of you have actually read the book. Well, I read the book. I've read the book back in the 70s, and I bought like at least a dozen copies of it and gave it to people because it was such a wonderful book. And in fact, I have a friend living in Portland, Oregon. I was living in Oxford, Mississippi, and she flew to, she had she was going to take a trip to visit her family in Minneapolis. And she found out that it was cheaper if she flew into Memphis with a connecting flight to Minneapolis rather than straight from Portland. So she said, hey, so she had a layover, like got into Memphis at like 5 o'clock and then had a red eye out of Memphis in the morning. So I drove up from Mississippi and we went out to dinner, and the purpose of the discussion, because she was the one who gave me the book, was to discuss if they ever make this into a movie, you know, who should play who should play Daisy, who should play Inigo Montoya, who should play Prince Humperdinck, who, you know, it was really fun. We just talked and talked and talked, and then we sat in the parking lot of the airport and just talked about it all night. It was one of those great. And then when the movie came out, you know, I went there with great trepidation because I was sure it was such a rich book. It would be impossible to do it justice. And of course, they couldn't put everything in. And this is the point that I'm trying to make in answer to the point you just brought up, Levi.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, they couldn't make the movie of The Princess Bride and get it all in. It was impossible. It would be impossible. It would just be a hodgepodge jumble. They would have to have it in 5 episodes, you know, a quintilogy, I guess you'd call it. I mean, literally, it was, you know, there are certain points that were left out, but you know, it was such a great movie and they did such a good job with it that I was just, you know, totally okay with it. And I felt the same even, you know, with the Lord of the Rings, you know, the old forest, the trek through the old forest and meeting Tom Bombadil. That whole part was left out.
Right.
And you know, yeah, that stuff is magical and wonderful. And what it really did to the trilogy is that it added to the epic scope of the adventure, that they were on. And of course, with a movie, they want to have more action. So you kind of lost the epic nature of the journey they were on. But, I thought they did a great job with it, So I think that the answer to your question is, yeah, we'll have to leave out some of it. That's just the nature of the deal, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's probably part of my downfall, or where I am not super proud of how I accomplished this story, was that I wasn't quite convinced that was okay. Like, I have such respect for J.R.R. Tolkien. I have such I admire his work so much that I don't want to be the one. Like, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is probably one of the best movie trilogies that have ever been made. But I don't want to be the one to have axed Tom Bombadil.
Exactly.
You know? While in retrospect, I absolutely agree, it would have been a weird sort of thing. Because he would have been so important, but yet such a small part of the story, Yep. So I resolved to be okay with axing important things from unless we're doing Dark Tower, in which case we're not axing anything.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Do we have anything else we want to talk about this? Any of the interesting things?
Well, one of the things that because I overheard, I didn't listen to it all, but I overheard you reading this story. And I the part about the thrush that was listening in, and it was the thrush that actually flew down to Lake Town and put the chink in Smaug's armor in the ear of Bard.
Oh, right.
So, and he was the, with the black feathered arrow, but he was on the lookout for that spot, and he wouldn't have known it if Bilbo hadn't caught the interest of that thrush,
Right.
So, anyway.
Well, I also like the idea Seth was talking about when Smaug comes, because he sort of comes and just like blankets the area with fire. And I had that idea of like a virus. If you think about like our house, it has a couple of wireless things in it. But think about like a really high technology house or a really high technology society, a sci-fi world where like everything's wireless and it's got signals and whatever. And then you think about like a AI coming, it sends out a virus that like a wave just disrupts things as it goes. It doesn't there's a lot of stuff in science fiction where, they're at their computer and then their computer goes weird. Oh, he's hacking in. Oh no, he's hacking in. And then they lose access to their computer. But I was also thinking about the attack on Hezbollah that happened recently, right? Where a bunch of people's pagers exploded.
Yikes, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
What?
I did.
Yeah, dude. Like a whole bunch of over 4,000 people were apparently Hezbollah fighters, and they all had these pagers that were specifically designed, and they all went off at the same time, and like thousands of people were injured, and like a bunch of people.
Yeah, it was like 2,700 dead or something, they said. Which, given if that's the truth of the death toll, you'd think there'd be a bit more talk of it, because that's like 9/11 proportions. But
yeah, but that same kind of thing where it's like, imagine what would happen if AI could just swept through our house, right? And everything that had a battery just like exploded because of the information output it was putting in, hacking into it, and immediately telling it to kill itself. That's all of our computers. That's all
of our phones.
All of our phones. Any phone that like old phones that are just sitting have batteries in them, And it's like, if it puts enough, all wires, all circuit boards that have a battery in it, just like our house would light on fire. Mm-hmm. It would just popping and smashing and all the screens have like a crazy message on them before the screen capacitors like all burn out. That kind, Seth was saying that's how the kind of breath was, which I thought was really interesting, because how I typically perceive hacking is in that one way I just said, or in like it's an EMP, so they like goes off and then everyone's stuff just turns off. It's like, no, one of the things that would happen with an EMP is that it would overload circuits.
Right.
It would overload things that didn't have protection, would be overloaded. So like there's stories of like in the Great Depression, like in the Dust Bowl and stuff, of there being so much dust in the air that there being like lightning coming off of fence posts.
Static electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or people would like shake hands and they would wake up like hundreds of feet from each other because the discharge of static electricity would like blow them apart.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So stuff like that sort of disastrous effect, which is a sort kind of an interesting, my thought for the Arkenstone was going to be like, the Arkenstone was a stone, but it was like a crystal matrix that could hold Smaug's personality, right? So he's an AI, but he has to separate himself amongst hundreds of other machines. But like the Arkenstone is like a specific, like a designed crystal that can like hold his entire, so then he can like, think better and process things easier because he doesn't have to split his process. But I like Seth's idea a lot more.
Yeah.
Where it's the whole like matter conversion thing, which then gives a lot of credence to how the dwarf/elves, the Thurador, create their economy, because they can turn things into matter into energy and then back. So yeah, those are two of the things that I really liked about the story. I think that if I had been a little bit smarter about it, I would have established a sort of solar system that this was taking place in.
Yeah.
And then maybe drawn like a solar system map so I could have gotten some more of an idea. But I was just saying, from this place in space to this place in space, which is, space is 4D. So it having to go through something is kind of weird when you talk about space.
The middle solar system.
A mid-world, if you will. Anyone else have any other interesting facts about The Hobbit or our story that you want to bring up? All right, seeing none. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this recap episode of Wait It Gets Better. We just got done talking about There and Back Again, a sci-fi tale. If you like these episodes, let us know. If you didn't like them, also let us know. Our email address is waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Our Twitter handle is @GetBetterCast. GetsBetterCast. If you would like to send us your information, like your critique, I'd be happy to read it, maybe even read it on air. If you want to just give us a cool idea, I'd be happy to use it. You will get credit if we end up using it. If you want to tell us about how terrible we are, about how we should have included the trolls, about how J.R.R. Tolkien is basically a golden god that should never be subtracted from, I would say just wait, it gets better.